Shin Megami Tensai 4 came out on the Nintendo 3DS back in 2012 or 2013, and I got it probably a year or two after it came out, and it was one of the toughest games I've ever dealt with. And I don't mean that just in terms of difficulty, but just being tough in general. You see, Shin Megami Tensei 4 or SMT4 is another game in the Mega 10 series, which has blown up in popularity with its sub-series like Persona. And if you've been into JRPGs, then you've heard of Persona 3, 4, and now 5, which has really put Atlus on the map for JRPGs. But the core series is the Shin Megami Tensei with no suffix added to it. And number 4 was the latest one on the 3DS. But I guess to set it up, in this game you play as a samurai. A samurai from this country called Mikado. And at the beginning of the game, you and a few other people go through a test to see if you're worthy of becoming samurai. Your player passes the test and becomes a samurai, and then finds himself having to hunt demons. Now, if you never played a Shin Megami Tensei game before, almost all of them deal with demons. And at the core of the gameplay is capturing, training, and battling demons. But a big part of the core series is also moral choices. Or maybe not just so much moral choices, but I guess you would call it alignments. Like, do you believe in law or chaos? It's not so much good and evil, but law and chaos. Now, this game is hard for a whole bunch of reasons. And if you was to just casually pick it up, saying that you've played Persona games and you know what you're getting into, you would be partially right. You would understand the relative basics of combat. That doesn't change if you have already played a Persona game. See, monsters have weaknesses. Some could be weak to certain types of physical attacks, gun attacks, fire, ice, lightning, etc., etc. And if you hit a monster with something that is weak to, you get buffed and a lot of times get extra turns. This is very similar across all of these kinds of games. That's no different here. And it's fun. It's very fun. But this game in particular is pretty brutal. And the first part that's brutal is the initial difficulty. Unlike Persona 3, 4, and 5, this game does not walk you through with kid gloves. When you initially start, you're going to get your butt kicked and you're going to see that game over screen a lot. Enough so much that I had to put the game on easy mode. And I think the last time I was forced to throw a game on easy mode just to progress a little quicker was with Catherine from Atlus. And I said it was a fun game, but eventually the puzzles got so hard and I wanted to see the story unfold so much that I had to throw it on easy so I could progress. And it's not just the difficulty that makes this game hard, like I said before. This game also has a painfully slow start. I mean, while initially everything is very interesting, like I said, you're a samurai in a medieval-like setting, but you're fighting demons, fighting and recruiting demons for this kingdom. and eventually you find yourself in urban landscapes fighting demons and recruiting and doing all kinds of missions. But the journey initially is very, very, very slow to build. So much so that I could see it easily turning away the average person who picks it up. And I'm testify to that myself. I easily put this game down for a couple years before I recently came back and went on ahead and finished it out. And I'm really glad I did, because while the story starts out very slow, it's kind of like an anime that has a very slow build, but it introduces the world and builds the world very well, and its characters and just all the things that are going. And once the story does kick off, which I gotta admit takes far too long to kick off, and that's this game's biggest weakness, is that its story takes way too long to get interesting. But getting back to it, when the story does get going, all of that pre-work does pay off, and I found myself super invested and I couldn't put it down. And it took me almost 60 hours to beat it, though I felt like I was getting to an end point around the 40-hour mark. Things really picked up, and the path that I ended up on ended up taking me another solid 10 to 15 hours. But aside from the difficulty of just fighting and the difficulty of dealing with the story, another big half drawback, half good thing is the game's overall map. I don't want to give away too much in terms of the story, but eventually you get to a big urban area, and it has to be one of the worst maps given that I've ever dealt with in a game. And initially, it's going to be a huge turnoff. You're going to find yourself lost a lot and just not knowing what you have to do. There's not things in way of waypoints. They just tell you in general where you need to go, and you just kind of got to go and figure it out. I ended up eventually having to use a guide to have any chance of beating this game, and most people are going to end up needing a guide to beat this. There's just no way, unless you are there's no way you could figure out all the places you need to go on your own, because there's not waypoints that just point you in the general direction that you need to go. You're going to find yourself wandering around a lot. But by the time the game gets towards its end, that the hardness of that plays into the story. I think the reason why it works out by the end is that the game is trying to instill a sense of dread in you. Like, the world that you're dealing with has a lot of demons running around, and humans are in pretty bad shape in this world. And I think the developer wanted to convey that to the player. And while initially it was a huge turnoff, by the time I got to the end, I was like, okay, that fits in terms of the story, but it still wasn't perfect in terms of its execution. Some people consider this the Dark Souls or the Shin Megami Tensai games. And once you get a hang of it, it's fun. Once you do go digging for guides and trying to figure out where you need to go, it truly is. It does pay off by the end. But we also you have to realize that there are multiple endings. Like I said, it deals with choices of where you stand on issues. And there are at least 3 or 4 endings you can get in the game. Now, I don't recommend striving to play a particular way to get a particular ending. I recommend you pick, when you are forced with choices, pick what you would pick if you was in that situation. And because all the endings are pretty satisfying, and it gives you a good glimpse into who you are and where you stand on big topics. And that's kind of been at the core of these games, a little bit more so than the Persona games. The core series really deals with those themes a lot more intimately. And like I say, due to all the world building and the slow start and you being lost and how tough the battles are, it puts the moral questions into perspective for you. And I found myself wrestling with some of the decisions and thinking about things well after the ending, to where I felt, hey, I gotta do a review for this game. With all that being said, on the other side of it, like I say, you recruit monsters, and you can recruit them by talking to them as you fight them. Persona 5 just started doing this, but this has been a core feature of the mainline series of games for a while. There's not much rhyme or reason to what it takes to say to bring a demon to your side, but that's part of the fun. Once you obtain demons, you can go through processes to fuse stronger ones. That's kind of how you get stronger teammates on your side. And the interface for doing that is really cool. Like, even though you're a samurai from this medieval kingdom, you have this gauntlet that's almost like a smartphone and an app for fusing. And it's pretty thorough as far as streamlining the fusing process, like even more so than the current Persona games. It's pretty cool. With that being said, I really did like the stuff they did with the monsters. Like I said, you still got to play on easy to really get a chance to progress, but regardless, I did like the interface with the battles. Another thing that I really liked was this English voice acting, which might be the best I've heard. Just excellent all the way through. They usually do pretty good with picking their voice actors, and this game is no different. But one thing I didn't like, and maybe I can understand because it is the 3DS, is that it's just, you just see pictures of the things that you're fighting, and they'll move subtly, but they don't truly attack you. You grow to get used to it. It doesn't take you out of the experience completely, but I always like to see the people execute the attacks. But regardless of that, Shin Megami Tensai 4, which is now have a pseudo sequel now called Apocalypse with Apocalypse at the end of the title. It was really fun. I recommend that you play it and get to the end, some kind of way, brave it to the end, just to go through those moral choices, to get a feel for what kind of person you are, and to reflect on the situations that the game puts you through. If I had to give the game a score, I couldn't go no higher than an 8. And if I had to base my score based on the first few hours, this thing would have been floating around a 5 or a 4. But by the time the game finishes, it has so much that fits together well that you see the vision. It's just very tough to get there. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this little video review, a little talk about Shin Megami Tensai 4. I might talk in depth more about the story in another video, but I just wanted to make sure to get this one out there. Thanks. Peace.